AI and machine learning and deep learning, and try to implement it yourself and put it on GitHub. Next. Yeah, so when you're doing these projects, one of the most important things is that you actually want to write about it. So what I mean by this is you're doing these projects and write blog posts, right? Yeah, you can go to the next one. Cool. So yeah, so blog posts. So these are, they have like, there's two reasons why you want to write about projects. So the first thing is you want to, so the first thing is that you want to write about them because you kind of build your skills. You want to build your skills, and the best way to do that is to actually try to explain this stuff to other people. And you know, I was at Udacity as a content developer, and like being a content developer and like learning these things, teaching these things, it really helped like solidify my understanding. And you can do this too. So when you're building your projects, like convert this into a blog post. And so this is an example from Jay Alamar, who has made some content with us. And so he like writes these amazing blog posts about different deep learning architectures, like Transformer. And so this is an example. So go ahead and check out his blog to see what he's doing. This is definitely like one of the best ways to kind of continue building your skills and solidify them. And it's also a great way to build a portfolio of all your different projects that you can share with employers. Okay, next slide. Projects. One of the best way to do it is to actually join the community. This is on Twitter. So the machine learning, deep learning, AI community basically lives on Twitter. And I recently wrote a blog post. It's called An Insider's Guide to Keeping Up with the AI Experts. And so you can find this on Udacity's blog. And you will, basically, I list out a bunch of different people to follow. We started a Twitter list that you can just like follow that, and it's just set up so you can follow everybody that I mentioned. So it's just a really great way to kind of keep up with the community, what's going on, learn about different, like projects that you work on, and actually like interact with people in the community too. Everybody's like really friendly, and so if you have questions, like they're more than happy to answer. It's just a really great way to kind of like learn more about it, be part of the community, and show off your skills. Okay, next. Right. Another thing you could do is contribute to open source projects such as PyTorch and TensorFlow. Next slide. So this can be a kind of like a daunting task, because like PyTorch and TensorFlow are both pretty big projects. But one of the easiest ways to get started is by like working on documentation. So you can go to, for instance, the PyTorch repo, look in issues, and you can filter by labels. And so you can find issues that are labeled as documentation. And so some of these, like the first one you see here is provide better documentation for torch.size. So that's like something that anybody can do, right? I mean, you're just updating the documentation. And you can like make a lot of good contributions to PyTorch, like the framework, just yourself, just as a normal person sitting in your living room. The next slide. Yeah, so you can get a little bit more challenging, beefier. If you can like look for bugs in the issues, and you can actually like start helping to make PyTorch better as a framework and fixing these bugs. And I actually know of some people on the PyTorch team at Facebook who like got noticed by contributing to the PyTorch library. And so this is a good way to kind of get noticed by people at Facebook and Google. And it's good to show off your contributions to the AI field to other employers as well. Hey, next. Yeah, and then as usual, you've probably heard about this a lot, but networking is very important. In a lot of places in the world, there's many meetups. So like on just like meetup.com. So this is one that happened last Friday. So analyzing and preventing unconscious bias in machine learning. So this is from Rachel Thomas, who is a professor at USF and is a co-founder of Fast.ai. So you can find a lot of these types of meetups around machine learning and AI. and get involved. You can even start meetups on your own, in your own towns and cities. So networking tends to be like one of the best ways to actually like kind of find open positions and get your foot in the door to at least starting to get some interviews. So it's always good to do. Next. Yeah. And yeah, my final bit of advice is to just keep applying to different positions. Like I said before, I I applied to 15 plus jobs, like data science positions, was rejected from all of them. And I have a bunch of friends and know other people who were experienced software developers, software engineers, and they just applied for 15, 20 jobs and they still get rejected. So, and part of the process of applying is that you can actually a lot of times ask for feedback from recruiters and from people who are interviewing you. And it's a way to learn like what your skills gaps are, so you can work on those and continue building those skills. And you just get better at the interview process the more you do it. So, and kind of my path when I was interviewing for things is, first I wasn't even getting phone interviews. And so then I figured out like how to start getting phone interviews. And once I started getting phone interviews, and I was still getting rejected from there, but I was getting better at phone interviews. And eventually I was able to get from the phone interview into the on-site interview, and then got rejected from those. But as I was doing it, I kept getting better at on-site interviews. And so you just it is a grind. I mean, I think pretty much everybody's going to agree that like finding jobs is a grind. But you just kind of have to persevere, and then eventually you'll find something that is perfect for you. Okay, I believe that is all I've prepared. So I think now it's time for questions.
Can you unmute me, Karen? Did you unmute me? Okay, yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for that, Matt. That was wonderful. We do have a couple of questions for you. I'd like to start right where you ended up, which is when you talked about phone interview versus on-site interview versus all of the different options and the progression and the leveling that you did. What was the one secret that you learned about phone interviews that really started to make a difference, where you felt like you were making more traction?
Right, for phone interviews. So I think, one of the most important things for that is it's really helpful. I think, one of the problems I was having with phone interviews is like I wasn't doing enough like research on the company, like the place I was interviewing at. And so I didn't really understand what they were doing, like what their products were. And so I think that's like one thing that really helped me out was that I actually, I actually started like kind of learning more about the company before I even did the phone interview. And secondly, it's really important to have to ask a lot of really good questions. So I've seen this a lot in interviews, and I did this myself too. If you don't like ask good questions, if you like don't have any questions, then the interviewer is just kind of gonna feel that you're not actually interested in the position that you're interviewing for. So that's another important thing you have to keep in mind.
So doing your homework and then asking the right questions sounds like a really good place to start. We have a couple of questions talking about places to start on what you need to get started in the field of AI and what prerequisites you think are in place before someone can actually jump into a role in this field. Do you have any guides for, other than, of course, the AI nano degree, but other types of skills that people might need before they can get started?
Yeah, types of skills. So to be honest, like pretty much to get started, you basically only need to know Python. And that's sort of like the bare minimum. To really understand what's going on underneath, you do need to know a bit of linear algebra and calculus. But for the most part, you can start building applications using PyTorch and TensorFlow and other deep learning frameworks, but if the only thing you know is Python. The other skill that employers are looking for is model deployment and model serving. So how do you actually turn these things that you're building into products, right? How do you deploy them onto the cloud, onto phones, and that sort of stuff? So people who are like software engineers already and have put other applications into production are actually kind of a step ahead of of other people who are new to like programming and engineering.
Along with the lines of having some programming experiences, is it necessary to know object-oriented programming before you move into AI?
Typically, yes. Oh, yeah. So let me think. So yeah, PyTorch itself, the way the API works is you do tend to build classes, and so it does. It is somewhat a requirement to understand object-oriented programming. But the deal is if you know Python well enough to get started, at that point you're already going to understand object-oriented programming. So basically, my advice is to spend like 6 months with PyTorch or Python and like kind of cover all the standard library, like know that stuff well enough, know Python well enough that you don't have to look at the documentation every time you try to do something, and being comfortable with like starting a script from scratch from like a blank page is kind of where you need to be, skill wise with Python before you like where you want to start with this.
Awesome. You talked about PyTorch and you talked about contributing. It can be really daunting to the first time that you contribute. Do you have any tips for someone who's never done it before to get them the confidence to say, I'm ready to make my first contribution?
Yeah, for that, yeah, like I was talking about before, the kind of the best way to do is to look through the issues and look for like really simple things like documentation, or even if you're going through the documentation yourself, like you're learning PyTorch or TensorFlow or whatever, and you're going through the documentation yourself, you see something that that you think could be better, and you change it yourself, and you can make a pull request. And in general, the communities around PyTorch and TensorFlow are very welcoming, and you can just start a conversation on GitHub. And yeah, and so going that way, it's probably easier to start with documentation other than big things. Yeah, and just kind of
Awesome.
get your feel for the community.
Get your feet wet and don't try to tackle everything at once.
Yeah.
So you talked about both PyTorch and TensorFlow. So I'm going to have to put you on the spot and see where you weigh in on the perennial discussion of which to go with. So can you maybe do a little compare and contrast between the two of them and weigh in on what you think the strengths and weaknesses are?
Yeah. So it's actually pretty interesting. So basically before this fall, this winter, TensorFlow was more, so it's more difficult to develop in TensorFlow because you're kind of using this different paradigm where you're defining this static graph, and it kind of makes your brain think in a different way than you normally would with Python. But at the same time, the way it's set up, it is much better for, or it was much better for actually deploying your models to production. It was easier to get into like a production C++ environment compared to PyTorch. But however, so like, and again, previously, right now, because like there's been some interesting changes, but PyTorch was much better for actually developing and working in Python, doing research, like actually, it was just much quicker to build your networks and much easier to understand as compared to TensorFlow. But now, PyTorch 1.0 was just released. It's being released like as a stable version and within the next month or so. And they've added a lot of features that takes your model that you've built in PyTorch and converts it into a C++ network that you can use directly in a production environment. So it just makes it much easier to do that. And then also TensorFlow 2.0 is coming out maybe in a month or two. And they've incorporated Keras as kind of the main API. And they actually ended up building it so that it's much easier to actually kind of develop your networks. So now both of them are kind of in the same stage, or at least within the next month or two, where they're both really good for kind of research and development, ease of building your networks, but they're also able to deploy to production easily as well. So I would say like previously PyTorch was better in my opinion, but I think now by the end of the year, they're going to be roughly equivalent.
And if you know one, isn't it true that it's pretty easy to move into the other because you've gotten the basic fundamentals down?
Yeah, definitely. Like once you understand kind of the concepts behind deep learning and different techniques such as dropout and batch normalization and things like that, then you can kind of transfer all that over to the other framework. Yeah, especially now that the new TensorFlow and Keras way of writing the code is very similar to PyTorch. And a lot of times you can actually just copy the code over and just change a little bit of text, and then you're good.
Awesome. Talking about copying over code, you talked about looking at projects that were interesting and copying those projects and trying to build them on your own. What are some of the criteria that you use to select a project that would lend itself well to building on your own if you've never done this before? So how do you find the right size project for that first one to jump into so you don't get overwhelmed and pick something that you'll never be able to finish?
Yeah. So probably the best way to start there is find projects, like find implementations papers that there are already a lot of implementations out there for example, there's like the style transfer, like Word to Vec, DC GANs, like things that we teach in the deep learning program. So those are like examples of projects that or papers that have a lot of different implementations online in a lot of different frameworks. And so just re-implementing it yourself, like writing the actual code, even if you're like looking at somebody else's code and trying to understand that, but just like writing your own code, building your own project, ones that like already exist. And what's cool is that you can kind of take these things that already exist, build your own implementation, and then extend it on your own into like some other direction that it hasn't been done yet.
We had a question on where machine learning fits into all of this. Can you put AI and the things you're talking about in the context of the bigger field as well with machine learning?
Yeah. So right now it's kind of interesting because AI right now is synonymous with machine learning. So a lot of kind of AI products are using machine learning. A lot of things so a lot of things that are being built right now are machine learning. But at the same time, like you got to remember that AI is actually a really broad field that it covers. AI has been around for like 50 or 60 years, right? And so there's a lot of different algorithms that fall under AI, and kind of like a small portion of that is machine learning. It's just that right now, due to like marketing and hype and everything, like AI, what people talk about as AI right now is really machine learning. But yeah, so machine learning is kind of like where a lot of the innovations, like a lot of the really cool things that are happening right now. For example, like AlphaZero that learned chess to be the best chess player in the world in 4 hours. It's machine learning. And so you can basically, machine learning is the foundation of all the new stuff, and so you can start learning machine learning using like scikit-learn. And our machine learning program kind of covers the basics.
Awesome. We had a question that's a really interesting one. How do you know when you're ready to start interviewing, right? Because this is a field where there's always more to learn and things are changing quickly and you're learning the basics, you're learning some more details, but when did you realize, okay, I think I'm ready to start interviewing?
Yeah, for that, I guess my personal feeling is that if you see a job description and you feel like you fit 70% roughly of the requirements, then you're pretty much good. Nobody's ever going to be like a 100% fit for the requirements you see on a job description. So if you feel like you hit 60 to 70% of the things on a job description, then you're probably good to at least start trying.
Awesome. So you talked about all of the applications you did and all of the times you had a no. How did you keep yourself from getting discouraged? It's really tough sometimes not to take that personally. So what was the mental strategy and the mindset you used to keep yourself applying and applying without getting discouraged?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think the best way to do it is just, like I said before, is like keep applying. Eventually, at least what happened with me, and I think what happens with a lot of people, is you just start not caring as much about being rejected. Like you just get rejected enough times, and then you sort of don't worry about it as much because and well, I think one way to think about it that you can kind of change your mindset is to think about these rejections as learning experiences. So one thing I try to stress a lot, and when I'm teaching and when I'm like giving advice, is that whenever you like make a mistake or you fail in some way, that's always an opportunity to learn. And so you don't make the same mistake and you don't make the same failure in the future, right? And so if you just kind of see all of these opportunities, all these interviews as learning experiences, regardless if you fail or succeed, then it can, so then it can kind of change your mindset and make you feel better about all this.
Awesome. Well, I think another part of that is getting a support network that you can turn to that believes in you and understands what you really know. But another part of that support network that goes beyond just the personal support is a professional support network. And I know you talked a lot about the making the connections and the great blog article that you wrote. Can you extend that beyond just like the passive, more following people on Twitter and keeping up with how you can start extending your professional network to really make some connections that you can reach out either to be mentors or to help get you connections to get in touch with the job openings?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think, so one thing you can do if you kind of start joining, the community on Twitter, if you start, contributing to these like open source projects, and you start meeting people, and then you can work on projects together. So one thing I did when I was in grad school is I was building this library for doing like Bayesian data analysis. And I started kind of like making friends through collaborating on this project together, like friends, like I didn't really know. And so that's one way to do is to actually try to like work on bigger projects together with, like a small group of people. And then, I'm trying to think. That's a good question. Yeah.
So it's almost like a neural network, right? You can start these small connections that lead to bigger connections, and then it just expands from there. Which and the other thing is, I'm really interested to lean in a little bit more on the connections, because I think that is the way that most people are successful in interviewing and making those personal connections, whether that be on the phone that you talked about or in person, but even just preliminarily making those connections in the field to let people know, to find that common ground where you might have an overlap. And I think the most lasting connections are authentic. So you find people who are like-minded, right? Maybe you talked about being drawn to a project, maybe being drawn to the same type of a project that you're both interested in, or that 3 or more people are interested in compared to. So we did have a question about the experience and getting over that. So I know you're talking about breaking into tech, but how do you get past that? We need two or more years of experience, and that minimum of experience to say you are ready to like tackle it. And I know this is part of the 70% you talked about, but that first initial job is the hardest.
Yeah, the first initial job is definitely the hardest. As far as so I think that's part of what, if you just keep working on projects, that is gaining experience, especially if you do something like actually taking one of the projects you build and just making like a simple web app out of it, or like a simple app on your phone. At this point, there's frameworks like on iOS such as CoreML that make it fairly simple to build a network in PyTorch and then convert it into CoreML native framework. And so then you can deploy your model on an iPhone. And so it's and there's actually a really nice blog post out there that just like kind of goes through like every step of doing that. So just kind of keep doing projects, keep building things, and then in that way you'll get this 2 years of experience. In my experience doing these things, it's really not about like how many years of experience, but like how much you've done, right? And just if you can like do a bunch of projects, put it up on GitHub, show people that you have these skills, that you know how to do this stuff, and I think that's more important than the actual like amount of time that you've been working in this.
It's great to hear you say that, because on the careers team, that's exactly what we tell people as career counselors is it doesn't have to be paid experience. If you're working with something for a few years, you've got a few years of experience. So this is really great. I wish we could go on, but it's time now to let everyone start to talk to each other. So I'd like to introduce Karen Baker, our community manager, who will explain the next steps for the breakout sessions. Karen?
Great. Thanks so much, Shane. And thanks so much, Matt, for joining today. It's great to see you on camera. I'm very excited to introduce our breakout sessions, which are an opportunity to turn the tables. So rather than hearing from us here at Udacity, now is a chance for you to learn from each other and learn from all of the students, all of the alums, everyone out there in the community, to really start to learn from each other's experience and what you found to work or not work, and why. And so to guide today's conversations, I'm very excited to introduce a few alumni hosts who have joined, who are really superstar hosts, superstar alums in the community. And they will each be hosting one of the breakout sessions. I'm going to ask them to unmute themselves and just say a few words, because I think you may be familiar faces in the community. So first, let's start with Vimarsh, if you could introduce yourself quickly.
Hey guys, hi, I'm Vimarsh, and I have been writing a blog called Acing AI. I am a past Udacity alum, done courses on deep learning and AI, and I'm located in Toronto.
Awesome. And next, I'm going to ask Ayshine to say hello. I think I've unmuted.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ayşin from Istanbul, Turkey. I'm software engineer at Eventscates. I'm doing some computer vision projects. And I graduated from machine learning engineering in a degree and artificial intelligence in a degree.
Bravo. And next we have Leticia. And Leticia, I'm going to unmute you. And you can...
Hi everybody, I'm Leticia. I live in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I completed many of the artificial intelligence nano degree, machine learning, deep learning, artificial intelligence, computer vision. And now I am doing deep learning nano degree, working as mentor and in computer science education. I'm happy to be here.
That's great. And then we also have Afshan. Afshan, if you want to say a few words, I know you're a very familiar face in this community. And Afshan might have dropped, so we're going to skip that part. So a few rules of the road as we go forward. In a few seconds, or in a minute, I'm going to break us all into breakout rooms, and you're going to see a pop-up show up on your screen that says you're invited to join a breakout room, and you have to click accept. There might be a few seconds delay, it's a bit slow, but don't worry, you will be put into a breakout room. And once you're there, a few rules of the road. So feel free to post a chat at any time. It's just the chat for your breakout. Be sure to focus on positive, actionable advice. This is a celebration and a real opportunity to share what you know with someone else and learn from each other's experience. If you're not speaking, be sure to mute yourself because there are a lot of people in the room. And when you do speak, be sure to remember to unmute yourself. And then finally, whenever you start sharing, start by introducing your name, your nano degree, and your location so that we get to put a face to this community. And so I'm going to break us all into breakout rooms now. You're going to see a pop-up and then be sure to click accept and we'll see you in the breakouts. Okay. Here we go.
We're all back now. Thank you, everyone. I know our breakout session was really interesting, so thank you for generously sharing. We shared tips, people shared book ideas, we asked questions. We didn't have all of the answers, but it was a great discussion, so thank you, everyone. I hope you've also made some meaningful connections in those breakout sessions. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about opportunities and trends in the world of AI with Matt Leonard. Our next session starts in 15 minutes, and it is a global meetup with the School of Data. So if you're interested in learning more about what's happening in the world of data, join us back in 15 minutes. You can find the link at udacityfestival.splashdot.com to join that session. If this is your last session of the day, thank you so much for being part of this amazing network. We are recording these sessions. I know several people asked about the recordings. We will make those available, and a thank you for joining us today. In the meantime, connect on LinkedIn. If you're an alum, visit the alumni portal at alumni.udacity.com to stay connected. If you're a current student, connect on the new Student Hub in the classroom. And if you're new to Udacity, visit udacity.com to learn more. In the meantime, stay curious and keep learning. Thanks, everyone.